Heart and Hand is proudly sponsored by NordVPN. David, we've had the opportunity to use our Nord accounts in the last couple of weeks. As someone who hasn't had an overwhelming experience with using virtual networks, I'm really enjoying being able to use my Nord account, and I think that, you know, with someone such as yourself with a background in it, it's proven to be really, really important to you.
Well, yeah, I used to work in web for a number of years, and in fact, that was my interest in web that made me start a podcast, you know, and get interested in the new things you could do. And therefore, internet security has always been something that I take a special interest in, because I think like most people now, Cammy, I do so much of my life is online, and so much of it is important stuff like banking and whatnot. So it really is important to me to know that I'm using something that's quite safe, and that I'm making sure my details are as safe as they can be. Because I've had the thing in the past where, you know, I've had to change bank cards and it's a pain in the neck, and, you know, it takes ages to get reset. So I'm keen to avoid that any way that I can. And especially with using things like public Wi-Fi networks, which, you know, hackers love. That's the kind of places hackers go to. So knowing that I just need to flip on the NordVPN and I'm safe and protected is huge.
It will allow you access into different streaming services as well, but they have the option of over 59 different countries, so you can change your virtual location with just one click as well, which gives you some real opportunities to be able to go out to get loads of different content, no matter what your entertainment is going to be, David. And I think that, as you've said, living in that kind of virtual world now, it just really opens up all the different benefits to it as well. And personally speaking, as someone who, similar to yourself, just does so much stuff online, but you're out and about constantly as well, having that kind of sense of security is also really, really important too.
Yeah, and it sounds geeky, and I admit to being a big geek, but it's really not. It's just something that I think with anybody who uses things to make their life easier, this helps. You know, this just puts your mind at rest a wee bit, and it's something I'm always banging on to my stepdaughter and to my wife to make sure that they use it too. So I've used many VPNs in the past, but Nord is the market leader for a reason. It is the best one, and it was the one I would have recommended anyway. Never mind the fact that we're sponsored by them now, but it's a really good tool. It's really useful if you need to take a short holiday for any reason. Then it's the ideal thing for that. But for me, the main thing is that I know, flip this on and that's me nice and secure, and I can go about my business without having to worry that I'm going to have to run the risk of exposing my personal information to people that really shouldn't get a hold of it.
You can get a NordVPN account as well through Heart and Hand with a fantastic discount as well. If you could go to nordvpn.com/heart and hand, HEARTANDHAND, you'll be able to go straight into a benefits site, which will then give you a discount on that. If for whatever reason the discount isn't there, you can just write into the coupon box Heart and Hand, all one word, and you'll be able to then have your discount applied there as well. Go on and check it out, folks. It is absolutely fantastic. David and I both love it, and would love to get you using it as well to provide that safety and security, and more importantly, peace of mind. Thanks now.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name's David Edgar, and I am your host as always as we begin our 12th season as a Rangers podcast. Can you believe it? It seems not that long ago that we were just a glint in the milkman's eye, but no, here we are, 12 seasons in, and now of course official media partners of Rangers. And I'm delighted to be back after Rangers' first league match of the season and joined by a stellar cast. First up, because of this media partnership, then we now have two people at Ibrox every week reporting on the match. One of them this week was me, and the other one was the mellifluous maestro of masterful melody, Mr. Martyn Ramsey.
How you doing, David? Listeners, good to be back, and back with a bang.
And also joining us, but he wasn't at Ibrox because he's from Saltkits, is the world's most fun bus convener, Andy McGowan.
Good evening, folks. Good evening, David, Martin. You'll be glad to know I won't be joining your corporate shill. To paraphrase Bill Hicks, I will be staying in the stands with the real people, not with the media like you.
Yeah, but I think you've got it the wrong way round in terms of the corporate shell. We're paying them, right? So it's a kind of slightly different relationship. Yes. Anyway, no. Well, you couldn't get in anyway because of the anti-sulkets clause that they put in all the contracts. So that would have been you scuppered nonetheless. But Martyn, you were there as Rangers, the defending champions, of course, took to the field to take on Livingston. 23,000 supporters in Ibrox for the match, which was fantastic to see, to get so many people back into the grounds. And hopefully now we are moving ahead to full houses sooner rather than later. You and I discussed before the match on Saturday that we remember Rangers' opening day performances as champions, late 80s, early 90s, and we sort of came to the conclusion that Rangers were usually rubbish on those opening days. Now, we usually won, but it was quite often a struggle. But there was pretty no-fuss performance at the weekend, and the job was done in a rather straightforward fashion.
That's very much the way it turned out. It was in not quite fits and starts, but the first 10 minutes, for example, was full of energy and that kind of enthusiasm, that dynamic that we seen so often last year that ran synonymous with that relentless theme that the manager tried to and did instill in the league campaign. The pace was great, the cohesion was super. We'll maybe talk about the selection in a minute, but regardless of the bodies that he put out, it didn't seem to skip a beat. And then we got that goal, and then we'll kind of, what's the point in doing that? Huge game coming up, and the next few weeks are going to be obviously important midweek. So it was kind of at arm's length, and then we just upped it again onto that gear that's there. I think there's clearly a few more gears left to go if need be, and that's what I took away from it. Just a team in total control. We did joke a wee bit about the kind of 9 in a row era. I think we had a couple of big ones against Dunfermline and St Johnstone from memory. There are loads of scrappy ones. In fact, a defeat obviously to St Mirren as well.
Right.
Just not quite getting into any gear. I think because we kind of assumed that the rest of the country was so far behind that we didn't need to really turn up until the autumn, and then we'd push through and we'd be out of sight by the spring. But this might and hopefully is a signal of things to come. The manager having complete trust and confidence in his squad to use options rather than use replacements when he needs to, and them just looking absolutely no different and just in total control of a game. Do we need to up it? Right, let's do that. And then once it's done, we don't need to expend any more energy.
Andy, something I noticed last season and I thought was there at the weekend was this is a team who've learned patience. And by that, I don't mean sitting waiting for something to happen. What I mean is they know that if they are working the ball, moving it, doing all the good things that they do, as well as chances coming, it's very tiring for the opposition, and that eventually the chances will come. They don't panic, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And I felt that was noticeable last season, and it was tempting to put that down to, well, there's no crowd, there's not, that pressure isn't there, but it's a good habit to have, or a good thing to believe, that that just keep playing our game. That's what top teams do. They believe that their game will eventually wear down the opposition enough. And I thought Saturday was a good example of that, when Livy were having to work terribly hard just to stand still, and then eventually Rangers just overpowered them towards the end.
Yeah, it's a total trust in the quality that we've got in the park, and we'll go on the bench, to be quite honest with you. And I commented on it because I think the crowd's a wee bit better at clocking that now, whereas in the past there might be a bit of impatience. And there was one guy close to me who was kind of giving it, get up the park, and if the ball went across the back foot, he was getting edgy. And I said, well, listen, this team aren't even getting a shot on target. We just need to keep playing here, and something will crop up. Because we've got guys like Kent, right when he came on, Hadji before that, Sakali even, you're going to get beyond, you're going to have chances at some point. So the patient thing, you're bang on there, because I think the game kind of sagged in the middle, and it almost became an extension of pre-season at one point. And I think that's a reflection of what you're saying there. It was always in the bag. I wouldn't go as far as say it was a formality, but we were so much in control, and they were so far from causing us any problems in our own box, apart from set pieces, that it was, it was a comfortable afternoon. But we do have a big difference today, in that for 2 seasons ago, we now have loads of options that can score goals. And
Yes.
that's a major thing now.
Davey, you in those first 2 seasons, and obviously before that, you would be near cardiac arrest until we got a second. I mean, it was manifesting itself physically. Have you relaxed a wee bit on the basis of everything that we've just said? I mean, 1-0 in any game of football, as we know, can always be precarious. The odd deflection and set piece or whatever. But this just looks a totally different animal, this Rangers team.
I think that's a key point. And I do wonder, and we talked about this last season, boys, but it's true that desperation of winning the league has gone. That's not to say we're not desperate to win the league this year. We always are. But that almost maniacal look that we had on the trophy, that sort of, we need that. We've got to get that back. Now that it's back, that you can relax a little. The team can't. They still need to do it. But there's also something, Martyn and I discussed this, and I'll get his thoughts on it in a minute, Andy, but I'd like to get your take. Things change in football. We know that, cycles, etc. You've got to work for them, and Rangers have. But I was struck with that feeling the whole weekend, because for the last few years, because obviously we haven't been winning titles, generally speaking, the champions in the opening day tend to get a fixture they'd be expected to win. It tends not to be one of the top teams in Scotland that go there. That's no disrespect to Livy, but I'm sure they would understand their place in the ecosystem. Whereas the other Old Firm team, which unfortunately was us, tended to get sent to quite a tough ground for us because it made for good TV. And of course, at the weekend, that's what happened. And the other thing that kind of crossed my mind, and as I say, I'll come to Martyn in a minute. I know his thoughts on it because we spoke about it at the weekend, but I'd like him to share that with the listeners. But I'd like your take on it. When you get into that position, David Martindale spoke about this after the match, that coming to Ibrox, when teams don't sense that vulnerability, there's a bit at the back of their mind when they go, look, this isn't a big thing for us. We're not likely to take points. We have a big game next week against a side that, we need to be getting points off those guys to achieve our aims. And I think Celtic benefited from that a great deal over the last few years. Whereas for Rangers, we didn't have that because teams sensed vulnerability. Teams knew, especially before Gerrard arrived, they have a right go at this mob and they might well crack. And at the weekend, just looking at the 2 games, I thought that's gone 180. That's changed completely.
Absolutely. It's too easy to say that we've made Ibrox a fortress because...
well, it is 20 wins out of 20 league matches.
It is, but it's too easy to say that it's more than that. It's psychological. I mean, these players come into Ibrox, I wouldn't say that they know their lambs to slaughter, but they know they're right up against it to the point where they're looking ahead to games that matter more to them. Whereas if you jump back even to Gerrard's first season, teams fancied their chances because there was still that bit of vulnerability around us. And to go back to what we were just talking about scoring goals, even when it was 1-0, they always knew that they had a chance because we weren't a particularly high-scoring team. If you know, that killer goal was something that was quite elusive at times for us.
It was.
So it was something that manifested itself in the crowd getting in the players' backs and causing unnecessary pressure. That's all gone now because the crowd trusts them. But also, I think a lot of these teams hopefully are coming to Ibrox knowing their beat before they walk out in that park, which, I mean, we're of an age where we've seen that before for continued seasons. And then you're right that, well, look at Warburton. Warburton's first game was up at Pittodrie, wasn't it? I mean, God almighty.
Warburton's first game in the top division was against Hamilton. It was a draw.
Well, we went to Pittodrie, I remember it could be, but maybe But, Celtic going to Tynecastle is a tough game anytime, but particularly so when they've got a new manager and 4 players they want to play. So you're right, the dynamics have completely changed. Plus, they're playing after us. We played at Bindé, points in the bag, then they've got to do it live in the telly, all eyes on them. It's a psychological thing, and both the players that come to Ibrox and the players at Parkhead will be feeling that psychological pressure. So long may it continue, because it's in your favour for now.
Martin?
Yeah, I'd go along with that. I think it is there in the ether, even as supporters. You know, I walked out of Ibrox on Saturday, David, thinking, they'll at least drop 2 points tonight. Now, Hearts are just up. Hearts are not very good.
Yes.
They weren't expecting. I don't know what they're expecting for this season, but they're not the kind of proposition that we've seen over the years. Tynecastle has its own thing, and that's fair enough. But even we, with that knowledge, still felt they'll definitely drop something tonight. And if we're assuming that, now I'm pretty negative whether that's a psychological crutch or not. I'm sure they will win, but that's gone now. Even as I don't want to tempt fate kind of thing. I don't want to even watch them in case they score kind of thing. Because the Rodgers team would be in trouble at times, but they would win. And it happened last season, David. This is just an extension, obviously, of everything last season. Well, Celtic fans would be maybe watching us on the Sunday away at St Johnstone or wherever, and having the same hopes that we had for the first 4 years or whatever it was we were back up before we won. Right, they might drop something here, and your dreams are blown by half time. It's 2-0, it's 3-0, and it's just this incessant, relentless machine. And that everybody senses that vulnerability. Fans sense it, players must, especially at home. And yeah, that obviously one game out of 38. There is a long old season ahead, but changing that dynamic is going to be some job, and it's not just about what Celtic do in terms of changing that dynamic. And I don't know if they have a wonderful month in the market or whatever. I asked the question at the weekend of the manager: how do we, keep that focus, reset, find that hunger again? It's not the obsession that it was. We've won that first title back, but sport's full of those holy grail moments. You've seen teams, you've seen individuals get where they always wanted to get, and then they fall off a cliff because they don't have that drive anymore. They've reached that summit. Clearly, Rangers isn't like that. We're kind of built on league titles. So, are we capable internally? Forget pressure from elsewhere, because it doesn't appear to exist at this minute in time. Internally, can we find that that reset, and not the obsession, but just a normal professional hunger to go and be the best in the country again? And early evidence would suggest that again we have that control, just to up it as and when.
Andy,
sorry, Dave, I was just going to say there's two hangovers in Glasgow. There's a hangover of joy that we've got, and we're dying to get back on it. Right, we're texting each other talking about going back in the break. From hell that actually, and grief, and they never want to drink again. So psychologically, we are bouncing, because you spoke earlier on about the kind of maniacal fixation on the title. It was because it was a football and life or death. If we'd lost that last year, then we would be having that hangover, and because you can't recover for that in one season. We could have lost last year, won it this year, and they'd still had 10 in a row, and it was mission accomplished for them. Whereas they can never get that back unless they go on another massive run. So the psychological impact cannot be understated, and we're on the crest of the wave, and they're Captain Nemo at this moment.
Yeah, you mentioned there about Rangers attacking options, and we started with Kent Hadji and Fashion Scala. Scott Wright and Kamar Ruth come on and got goals. You've got Alfredo Morelos, Cedric Itten there as well, that are more than capable. Jermaine Defoe, that are all capable of contributing. Joe Aribo, creative force in midfield. John Lundstrom was on the bench, and although maybe not an out-and-out creative player, he's certainly somebody that will contribute and give a very solid basis for that. The amount of firepower there is quite frightening, really.
Well, I said last season, and it raised a few eyebrows, and a few folk thought I was drunk on 55, and I said it was the best Rangers team I'd seen. And I'd go far as to say this is the best Rangers squad since Advocaat's Squillions. with question, because I watched the game back yesterday, because you obviously take it in a different way than being at the game, and I was sitting there saying, we have some squad. If it stays as it is, and I do expect departures, but as you've said there, all across the front six, we have so many options, but it's not just a case of bodies. We've got different types of players. So Hadji is a different type of player for Wright, as for Kent, as for Sakala. You know, Aribo's a different kind of player for Kamara, for Lundstrom. There's variation in the squad for Arfield. I mean, we forgot about Arfield, who's
Arfield, of course,
very, very competent attacking midfielder. So you've got so many options that you've got to think that squad depth is going to pull through here. But more than that, if they're all fit, Gerrard's got loads and loads of options that you can then give you those tactical inches for types of players. So that'll be put to a test against Malmo, obviously, because we're losing Kamara, and Kamara's just exquisite at this moment in time.
Yeah, he is.
But as far as the squad goes, you're sitting there saying we're in a really, really good place. And I can't really think of one player that you would say, don't fancy him. You know, Bassey came in as good as Barisic, delivery-wise, etc., but he's still super competent and well above what we needed for that game. And then you've got Patterson. I said you've just got so many young Kellys coming. I could go on and on and on. There isn't a player there that you're saying, Ken, but he's got to go. They're all of a level now that you've no really got concerns if they were to come in and for an extended spell in the team. That's something.
Neither does the manager, Andy, and that's the difference. Those first two seasons, you can't win a league without a squad unless you're super lucky. But even then, these days, you just can't rely on 12, 13, 14 players to win a league title. Which meant, I'm sure, in those European qualifiers, those early weeks in his first couple of seasons, he would have loved to have chopped and changed freely and with total confidence. But he probably did rely again on a few players, especially in attack, where he would love to just mix things up and keep things fresh, keep them fresh. But he probably felt he couldn't. He was making changes because he maybe felt he had to, or only when he felt he had to. And that's the difference. If you want to be slightly concerned or critical, that maybe the only place in depth that we still maybe aren't quite there in terms of reliability, in terms of fitness, is the centre of the park. And who knows what those options will look like on the 1st of September. I would guess different from what we're looking at just now. But we all said last summer, midfield needs big investment. We need 2 first-team players. Probably got one in Lundstrom. But we did not reckon on this Indian summer of Steve Davis, which just appears to be continuing. But for how long is that realistic? And Kamara's consistency last year was exquisite, where it wasn't there before, right? That wasn't a thing last summer. So will he still be there? Can you rely on Davis? Arfield, Jack have big fitness issues long term in terms of getting more than 6 games in a row with them. So that's the only place that we'd probably looking for maybe more options. But that's a decent place to be.
I think as well that something you mentioned to me was the defence. Now, we've got faith in the defence, even with a couple of changes at the weekend, because John McLaughlin we've seen him. You know, it's not a case of he's an unknown backup, but we know what we'll get from John McLaughlin, and we're all pretty happy with that. Calvin Bassey came in and did well at the weekend. Obviously, Leon Balogun was there ahead of Philip Helander, who was later returning because of his international exertions. But that is a mean defence. They've proven it last season. They're confident. And again, that's something because, you know, with this Rangers team, especially at Ibrox, when opposition come here, it's not about getting the win. It's not even about getting a goal. It's about getting opportunity, because that's how difficult it is to take the ball. David Martindale said to us in the press conference afterwards, he said, first of all, Rangers are the team to beat. But he also said there's nobody in Scotland can keep the ball like them. And therefore, you're working all the time. It never stops. And it just takes one lapse from your team and suddenly, boom, they're away. They've done something. And I think you saw that with the first goal at the weekend. Now, Hadji still has an awful lot to do. The first touch is brilliant, but then a lot of players just hit it and it gets blocked. and instead he takes the wee drag, and then still he looks up and he puts it into the top corner. I mean, it's still a postage stamp finish even after all that. So it's that differentiating quality. It's that thing that just tips a team away from being a good side and towards something very special indeed. And of course, this team has won a league by 25 points. They are special. They went a whole league season undefeated. But in terms of where they're going this year, I think that every Rangers fan is entitled to be as confident as we all are, because our team are proving it for us. We are not doing this based on supposition or faith. We are doing this based on the evidence of our eyes and what we know that this squad are capable of producing.
It's not just 20 games at home in the league. 4 goals conceded.
Ridiculous.
And you go back to confidence based on evidence rather than just hope, which every football fan
is entitled to
at this stage. Well, on Friday night anyway, every football fan is absolutely it's their birthright to have that optimism on the eve of a new season. Every single one that can be extinguished in a bin fire by Saturday
night 10 o'clock.
But that's fine. But ours isn't just in faith. I think Christ, it has been in the last few years. I think there's a player in Zalem or whomever. You just try to convince yourself we don't need to go through those hoops. Pardon the pun. It's there in front of us. And I've said it on Twitter, and it's the only concern I have is complacency and looking around going, what do we have to do here? We can slip into second gear if we need to, and you can get your pants pulled down sometimes if you're not absolutely on it, and that's Rangers' biggest challenge. But the manager seemed still quite driven and quite happy to take that responsibility of keeping them on their toes every week. But I can't help but feel that's the position we're in. It's only we can beat ourselves, it feels.
See, I think long term that's inevitable at any team. Now, I differentiate team and club here because teams change and they break up, and I think it's inevitable after a while. Hunger goes, people start to look elsewhere, players move on, all of that can happen. But I really don't think we're there yet, Andy. I don't think we are. I don't even think we've approached that stage of it yet. I get the impression this team are not sated, and maybe in a way the big disappointments of the Cup last year, this is not a team who don't have anything left to do. There are still a lot of goals out there for them, and I think that in a way, as painful as it was last year, and I think we would all agree we should have won a treble last year, but I think in a way that it's kept them focused and determined to say, no, there's still a lot more we could add to this cabinet.
Aye, and in my more positive moments, I thought that exact thought, David, that no one in the Cups could be, well, it wasn't desirable. It leaves that gap of hunger. And then there's obviously the Champions League thing. I think we're sitting here very, very confident in everything we do. We've got supreme confidence in the team on the park, the management squad, the football department, the board. Everything is lined up at Rangers at this precise moment. And you just feel that. And the players don't look any different than they did right in the heart of last season. Goldson is a wild card. So if I'm a Celtic fan, the one personnel change I want to see isn't it Celtic, it's Goldson, and something happening to him, either getting sold or getting injured, because I'm not telling something everybody doesn't know anyway, but he's our Van Dijk, and if you take him out for a prolonged period, then it would be a far bigger test for our entire team on the park, because he makes a huge difference to the way we play. But things can change very quickly. I mean, the Champions League, if we get past Malmo, then we've still got a tough tie there. If that doesn't happen for us, and this is me being super pessimistic, I think we've got the strength, resilience and character to keep going, because we win the league this year and we're straight in next year. So it's no one of these things where I think this, whereas a couple of years ago resilience was something I often spoke about, we didn't have resilience and we were easily knocked as individuals and as a collective. I don't think that weakness is there now. I think we're far, far stronger. And rightly so, because we look at the personal journeys of Tavernier. You look at guys like, you spoke about Kamara, Aribo and Hadji, young players that have been thrown in at Rangers with huge expectation, and they're different players to what they were when they first started, physically and mentally. So they've all got to take that experience, and that's what brings the ability to get through hard times. So if we do have knocks this year, and we will, because we'll lose a game, right? We can't go 2 seasons unbeaten. So at some point there'll be hysterical, Rangers have been beaten. That happens, we'll just pick it up again. I'm quite sure of it. And we showed that last year when we got knocked out the cups. 2 major blows, and we just picked up again. That's a good sign. So I'm just delighted with where we're at, and I've never been so content. But then the kind of alarmist Andy in me says that's, something's always going to happen. I don't know if it's a Scottish thing, but you're always thinking there's something going to knock you off your pedestal. But if it does happen, I think we've got strength of character through the club, never mind the team, to just roll on and keep going because we're in such a good place.
Martyn, something Andy touched on there. Now, not to go to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, but it is kind of true that as a supporter, this is not me talking about the players, this is as a supporter, we are sitting here, we're raving, and we're all excited. We were all at this on Friday night, we were all at this on Saturday afternoon, especially, everything that went on. And there is a bit of you that goes, hang on a minute here, I've got to try and find something, right? Because I'm getting ahead of myself here. And then I think, well, am I? Or am I just reflecting what I'm seeing?
Well, I think anyone saying 56 is in the bag is probably getting slightly ahead of themselves just by nature of time. But
sorry.
But it's getting, it is getting back to that stage, and we kind of joked about that Darth Vader seems to have, there's a presence I've not felt since or whatever. We're kind of back to that mid-90s. We are so happy with what we have, and everything else is on fire. Now, this can change. Football can change quickly, but it feels like there's a gap. It's disconcerting because it really there shouldn't be. We've climbed so high so long to get back on the top in this country. It shouldn't feel like we've got such a big gap between us and the rest. I guess we all expected that when we did win the league, well, it's going to be nip and tuck for a few years. We're going to be, maybe win one, they win one, whatever. But it's a weird kind of feeling of comfort. Andy mentioned contentment, and that's kind of the word. And when's the last time we were content? You probably are going back to 99, 2000. Even though those McLeish teams, Davey, those seasons were chaotic, right? Those were absolutely right to the very end. You're probably going back to 99, 2000. And in terms of starting the season, looking, so we should do this. And what can Europe bring?
Well, that's
what can Europe bring? What can the Champions League bring? Now, for me, it's slightly different because in '99 people were still talking about could we actually win it, especially when we defeated Parma. But that's the only thing I can kind of relate this feeling to in terms of Rangers past. It's like we have got balance and quality pretty much everywhere. Apart from that central midfield that I mentioned earlier, but we're kind of nitpicking. Again, we'll see where we are on 1st of September, but we're kind of looking at this. This is a good squad and a manager that feels on his game. They look, this is Barnes-esque stuff. Although he won at Pittodrie 5-0, I'm pretty sure on his first day of the season. But we're just looking at a gap, and it's disconcerting because I don't think any of us expected a gap to be there. But obviously a long way to go. But this is me talking, right? I mean, I'm pessimist.
Yeah. Albert Tartlock.
You can only call it on what you're looking at, and yeah, August is a huge month for football clubs. We know that. I don't think we've really experienced a dreadful window under Gerrard, certainly not a summer one. But maybe that's with the sting in the tail. Maybe we lose a couple of big guys, big important players right at the very end. We can't really do anything about it. I would be amazed given how competent Ross Wilson and the manager have been in that department if they allowed that to happen, and maybe Celtic pull a few rabbits out of a hat. Who knows? But as we speak on this Monday evening, 99's kind of what it feels like again.
You made a point there that is just absolutely spot on, which is this is the first time in a long, long time that I can remember Rangers fans seeing Europe as something vital and exciting and to be looked forward to, as opposed to maybe a wee bit at the back of the mind going, yeah, but with other things. You know, there's other more important things. Andy, you said on here a couple of times over the last few seasons, Champions League entry, which at the time did look quite far away, would be like strapping a jetpack to Rangers. Now, of course, we have a decent opportunity, Malmo, and then if we were to get through that, we would face a winner of Ludogorets versus Olympiacos. None of those three sides are diddies. They're all good sides, so none of them are a gimme, but they are also winnable. They are ties that you would look at and say, we will take that. If that's, to get to the Champions League, you'd be quite happy with that. Of course, none of this next season. The winner of the league this season gets in. So winning the league this year is worth, 35-40 million pounds regardless. And the chance of making it 2 years in a row, what it could do for the long-term health and success of the football club almost can't be quantified.
It can't be quantified, and it would be utter vindication for every minute act that has taken us to this place. And I'm going down to everything, Dave King, the Three Bears, every single thing that's taken us to this place since we started to be right-sided would be vindicated and repaid financially, to be quite honest with you. I do think we need to caution it, because you've said quite rightly, there's no guarantee here. Football can kick you right hard in the balls. And although we're saying, like, is it just a mentality thing where we're thinking that the worst can happen, or it's just in the corner, or everything's too good to be true? Anything can happen over the 4 legs that lie ahead of us if we've got them. And if it doesn't happen, then the real perspective that should be taken is that, okay, big opportunity missed, but we then should be, we should be in the group stages of Europa, which is still worth 20 million. So it wouldn't be ideal, it wouldn't be the desired path, obviously, but if we get into the Europa, then all is not lost, and it's still financially, it would keep the wolves through the door. It might see, player trading accelerated a wee bit, but I think the board, if they're sensible, and they are sensible, will be sitting there saying, right, well, see if we don't get any Champions League this year, do we need to right-side it right now when, as you've said, we keep going for league and you've got it? So you've actually got 2 bites at a 30-40 million pound cherry, if you like. It could be an 80 million pound cherry, but, I don't think the board are sitting there saying we must qualify this year and we must qualify next year. I think if you get one out of the 2, then it's still a very, very good return for what's been put in so far. I mean, you look at the player squad, just to look at it for the player squad, so we're not even going into off-the-field stuff, which is, Ibrox was looking great on Saturday. I was in an enclosure for the first time in years, and it was spotless, and the concourses were looking fresh, and the ground is bang up to scratch, and Edwardson House. But you look at the team on the park: McLaughlin, Balogun, Aribo, Davis, Sakala, Kamara, basically, all brought in for nothing, or next to nothing. You then had Lundstrom on the bench. So we have got our shit together for the first time in years. In fact, for the first time ever, really. You go back and think about what used to get written in follow when we were winning everything about the state of the club and how we ran our affairs in the transfer department and everything else, and medicals. We have never, ever been as professional and thorough and as joined up as we have just now. So I don't think that we're in a position where we throw the baby out with the bathwater if it doesn't happen with Champions League this year. Extreme disappointment. I think we're resilient enough to come through it, but I think we'd immediately refocus and say, right, well, we just need to win this league now, and then you've got it. So we're in, again, a really good position to be in, where, okay, you don't get in Champions League, you fall into, God willing, the Europa League, right? And then if you really want to get to shit street, then you fall into the conference. But what do you make for that? 10 million?
About 8 to 10, they reckon, yeah.
Whereas before we weren't even qualifying for Europe, or when we were doing in the lower league. So,
and either of those gives you a puncher's chance of winning a European trophy.
I think that's
Whereas last season, people were saying, wouldn't mind if we didn't qualify for the Europa League, to be honest, because the obsession was the league. We don't want these Thursday nights, no thanks, nothing that can derail this. Whereas we just wouldn't even be considering that now. We are a European team again, and if that's the Europa League, then, as Andy says, fine, we can probably balance that with a league charge that guarantees you that Champions League football next year. If we were to make it past Malmo and then past probably Olympiacos, bonus time, wonderful. But it's, as I said, our minds as fans, I think, have shifted now that we've just got that 55 thing kind of out the way, and it needs to be out the way. I think it is done now, and that was lovely. But this is Rangers. You shouldn't really be going over the top about winning a title, as special as that was. It's what we do. It should be the norm. So, what's next?
Yeah, definitely. We won't go into too much detail about the game against Malmo because a lot of you might not listen till very close to kick-off. If you do want much more in-depth coverage, over on our Patreon, patreon.com/Heart and Hand, there's a full preview of the match, listing all Malmo's key strength, etc. And also there's a separate show that'll drop at 9 o'clock on Monday, which has an interview with a member of the Malmo fan media, and you can find out what their thoughts on the tie are. But I watched some of their game against HJK Helsinki last week, and they've got some good attacking players. They won 4-3 over 2 legs, no away goals now, remember. They can put together some nice stuff. They play a very high line defensively. I would expect us to make chances against them, Andy, and it'll be about making sure the back door's locked and taking advantage when the opportunities do come up. How different is European football two-legged ties now that we don't have the away goal? Because the old days of pulling a Walter, if you like, of clean sheet at home, go over there and get an away goal, that's gone now. You can't really do that.
I think it changes the dynamic completely for us because, we are very familiar now with Gerrard's approach in Europe, and it's son of Benitez, isn't it? He's really adaptable, and there's 2 distinct kind of ways that they play the home and away games, but they're adaptable and they're flexible, the Rangers team. And you've seen us, last year was a perfect example in the group stages with Antwerp. You can up the ante whenever we want. We can put the foot in the accelerator and kind of throw caution to the wind if we want, because we're a good attacking team. So I'd like to think it helps us. It'll help us against teams that are relative peers. It'll not help us so much when you go away, if we do get into the Champions League and you're against one of the behemoths, because if you want to go toe-to-toe with them, then good luck with that. But
if that happens, it means we're in the last 16, Andy, so I'd be willing to take that.
But I think these qualifying stages, Malmo, Olympiacos, we've got to be looking at them as peers. Malmo probably just below us, Olympiacos probably just above us in terms of finance and status and recent histories. But I'm looking for us to go out there and play our natural game now, and it just means you don't need to shake your pants when they score at Ibrox, if they score at Ibrox. Because we've all been there when the air's been sucked out the ground, because it's not just a goal you've lost, it's an away goal. Nobody's like, oh no, and it changes the dynamic completely, whereas you can play much more a natural game, and I think that will help us.
It changes the importance of the order back to where it kind of used to be, that traditional British attitude that you want to be home last because of the atmosphere and the chaos and everything. And then when British football suddenly kind of realised the importance of away goals, it was like, well, no, you don't. You want to be away last. You want to be dangerous. You want to have the game kind of on a knife edge, and where your goals are going to matter more. Which is why I had a bad feeling about that Slavia Prague tie, just because of the way that the legs were drawn. I think it's kind of back to the old-fashioned way now. If you can just keep the thing set up, then you use that home advantage, and it really becomes a real kind of cup tie in that second leg. But it's exciting.
The only thing that's concerning me about this tie is the differentiation in fitness, because how many times have we drawn Gothenburg, Malmo, whoever these teams, Scandinavian teams that are even just 10 games ahead of you, hell of a difference to what that makes your match fitness. And we look sharp against Madrid. We look sharp for the first 10 and the last 20 against Livingston, I suppose. But they will be ahead of us in terms of sharpness, and we'll really need to be in top of our game for the first minute, to be honest.
I'm going to go into limb, Andy, and say that we're probably in better physical condition than we were in Gothenburg 97.
I could have got a game in Gothenburg 97.
Well, you didn't have to do any running, so I mean that was the strange thing about that away performance in Sweden, that Rangers decided to. I think we invented walking football that night. Whatever they did a night, it was a lovely night. So everybody was just, you know what it's like when you get back for your holidays. You don't just get to your desk and go boom and into it. You build up, you scratch your arse and read the paper and look at the window, as Billy Connolly said, and Rangers certainly did in 97, that's for sure. And also against Strasbourg, like a month later, exactly the same. So, yeah. Anyway, folks, that will do us for the first one. As I say, there's loads of great content over on Heart and Hand. Now, we are, as we say now, and listen to Heart and Hand Extra from last week if you want more info on it, but an official media partner of Rangers, which means that we do get access to the club. We do get more in terms of things like interviews and all of that kind of content. You'll get it exclusively at Heart and Hand. No point waiting the next day and reading it in the paper when you can get it as it happens from us. And Martyn, I just want to bring this up because I have been laughed at a lot for, when in the presence of the gaffer, fanboying. And when in the presence of Stephen Gerrard, like occasionally I'll say, "Good morning, Stephen," and he'll say, "Good morning, David," and you can hear my heart flutter in the few seconds that it takes for me to compose myself. And I've been mocked, Martyn, mocked, I tell you. Well, I did notice on Saturday that wonderful mellifluous voice of yours raised a half octave when he fixed his glare on you. Could you explain to people that maybe haven't been in that situation, just what it's like with him and the aura that the man has?
Yeah, I mean, you and I have met many Rangers greats. Andy has as well. It's always exciting. We're fans, ultimately, at the end of the day. And some of those Rangers greats have been great value, been great fun. Some not so much. But they're still human, and you can kind of adjust to that quite easily. And maybe it's because we met a lot of those long after their time at the club, that maybe some of that aura disappears a wee bit just with age. But I don't think I've ever been in a room with anyone who has that sense of themselves in any walk of life. And yeah, I mean, I hope I'm kind of reasonably composed in my job and normal life and whatever. And people are just human beings. But I did catch myself thinking, well, what are the words that are coming next? I've forgotten those. He is an impressive kind of guy. Souness is maybe the only one that comes close. And I imagine when Souness was in his pomp at the club, that would have been something very similar. But he just carries when it's a direct look at you when you're speaking. And I mean, people talk about it all the time with famous people, big names, but I've been lucky enough to meet quite a lot. But there was something very, very different. Maybe it was just because it was new. But yeah, he does carry himself in a particular way.
Yeah, he does, and I'm glad that he's in charge of our club.
Mm.
Yeah, I've got a young Padawan, and I was talking to him about various things and coaching and development and everything. I says, all he needs a wee bit of gravitas. She's working on gravitas, and I didn't really think what I was saying to him, and he's like, "How do I work my gravitas?" I says, "I actually know." Gravitas is something that, well, Gerrard had it, Walter Smith had it, as soon as you say had it. I don't know what it is. What is it? Is it by virtue of achievement? Is it by virtue of the way you carry yourself? I don't know. But you've either got it or you haven't. And by Christ, he's got it. And you can see that when the players join Rangers. I mean, we're old enough to remember players signing for Rangers and saying Souness was the reason they signed. They wanted to play for him. how many? I mean, look at Sakala.
Yeah.
It's because of Gerrard. He's obviously thinking, I might play for Steven Gerrard. Lundstrom, I dare say, that's a big part of that. It's the weight of the man.
And that weight can be counterproductive. That can be very heavy on players because of that gravitas, because of that stature. That it isn't just a normal manager berating you or pulling you up and digging you up. So it does work both ways. Some people can feel 20 foot tall and sometimes players can be completely overawed. But this is Rangers, and we talked about Gerrard when he arrived. He will fill the blazer. Whether he's got the technical abilities as a manager, we'll need to wait and see. But there was never any concern the way we had of Warburton or Pedro or whatever. He will fill that blazer. And if players can't cope with playing with that, well, they shouldn't be here. I mean, that goes back to Struth. I hear you're a fine player, son, but can you play for Rangers?
Yes.
It's a different ballgame, and that's when you have someone as a leader, and Wilson does his job and Part does his job, but Gerrard is the figurehead, and he empowers his coaching staff. By the way, he doesn't meddle in absolutely everything. I think that's the key to the success. But he's our figurehead, and Rangers and Celtic need figureheads. They need presidents. They need men of stature. Project managers do not work.
Spot on.
Nothing.
Spot on. And on that, because I think that we're all having such a jolly good time at the moment, I will wrap this one up. My thanks, of course, to our executive producers in London, Mike Lee and Paul Miles. Who'd have thought we'd ever get 12 years in, guys? And, of course, to two wonderful guests. Firstly, Andy McGowan.
Pleasure, as always.
And Martyn Ramsey.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Andy. And have an enjoyable season, listeners.
Well, I just suspect we might. Right, thanks for listening, folks. Cam will be back with you on Heart and Hand Extra later this week. I'll be back here next Monday. Until then, have a great week. Take care. Bye-bye.